Welcome back to Evolve. Today we have the honor of speaking with Mr. Mrtimswain, who is a cultural consultant, entrepreneur, and a Texan.
That's right.
Who is now in Accra.
That's right. I'm glad you put in that part about Texan, because no matter where we go in the world, one of the most salient identifiers is the state we come from. But listen, I'm glad to see you. I've been a fan of the content, and so I'm really, really, really happy to have this conversation with you guys today.
Yeah, it's an honor for us, and I think let's get straight into it then.
Sure.
How did this Texan end up in West Africa, in Ghana?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short story, because the long story may take too long. The short version is 2006. I joined an organization called the Impact Movement, and that organization focused on doing like development within African communities, a Christian organization. And so at one point they sent the largest number of like African-American missionaries to Africa at one time. And so they said, hey, we're going to Ghana next year. And for me, Africa was like this, it was almost like this holy pilgrimage, honestly. Like the way I heard my Muslim friends talk about going to Mecca, that's how I felt about going to Africa. Like one day in my life, I have to make the journey. So when the organization said, we're going to Africa next year, particularly Ghana, I was like, I don't know what it's going to take for me to get there, but I'm going to be there. And so in 2007, I still have the ticket from 2007. That was the first time I landed in Accra, Ghana, back at the old airport. If folks remember, when you used to walk into the old airport with the lady, there was a picture of a lady with a fruit basket on her head and it said Aquaba on the top. That's the old airport. So for folks who've traveled, back and forth for a while, you remember that old airport. But that was the first time I came. And then after that, it was the first time in my life truly where I felt like I simply existed as a human being. And yeah, then after that, as Kwame Nkrumah said, Africa was born in me from that moment on. And so, throughout the years, I had some more trips. But that was the initial time of me coming actually to the continent through the gateway of Ghana.
That's very deep. And we want to hear more about the stories because it's been 10 years now, right? Or more than 10 years that you've been here.
Oh, so it's been about half of that. So about 5. I've been coming back and forth for like 20. But like permanently relocated has been about 5.
Okay. So we're going to hear more about that after. But I just want to ask you to follow up on what you said there. You said you simply exist. You felt like you simply existed. That's a very deep statement. Could you tell us what exactly did you mean?
So I'll tell you something interesting. So it was a group of us. We were young college students. All of us identified as African-American or some variation of Black. We had some multi-ethnic folks that were with us. But anyway, different socioeconomic statuses. And we kind of talked about it in the group. We said, is this what white people feel like in America? Like, because we have no consciousness when we go into a store that we are being followed around because of the color of our skin. And even the associations with the color of your skin did not exist here. Obviously, there's some legacy of colonization that exists, but there is no systemic racism that exists in Ghana. I know folks in the chat may fight me over that, but the word was systemic. And so when we came here, and particularly me, a part of the group, when I came here and I felt that it literally was a liberating feeling. And I think it almost like, it felt like clearing up a mental kind of hard drive, right? Because in the States, you consciously have to be on guard all the time about how your presence shows up. If it's nighttime and it's cold outside and I have a hoodie on and, there's a group of young white women in front of me, I have to make my presence known. I may do some cough or like, or, do some, just to let you know that I'm here, right? But when I came to Ghana, hey, I didn't care. I didn't care at all. So it was really just this feeling, like it was just a liberating feeling of like, okay, I feel like I'm just a human being and I have mental space now to think about how I show up, where I'm going, what I'm doing, without that being the most salient part of my identity, particularly race.
It's a beautiful feeling. And I feel like even though we don't look the same, I've felt that similar kind of profiling in the West. And I felt how nice it feels to be in a place where they don't have that media bombardment from the young age that Black means this, Asian means this, Pakistani means this. So that was the first feeling. But then how did it pan out into wanting to actually come and make the move? So you felt that now and then,
So that's a really good question. I think that first trip, was transformative. Like I went back to the States, I say feeling extra black. Like it was almost like I felt like it was a bad mentality, but I almost felt like I'm more superior than the rest of you black folks because I've been to Africa.
You've been enlightened now.
Yeah. So I went back really like, brother, you don't understand. I've been to the motherland myself. But it was a part of me. And so that never left me. I went again in 2012. I went this time with my wife, and it was that trip that was actually transformative for me. Because by this time, I finished school. Like I was in pursuit of that quote unquote American dream. So, you know, the white picket fence to all of that. And then, but I still felt like the most salient part of my identity is the color of my skin. It was that trip. I think it was 2012 or 2013. I'm not sure. I know it had to be 2013 because I was married at the end of 2012. So 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went that time, it was like, I felt like I was reminded, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. It was that trip. It was that feeling of like that liberation that really something in me that trip was birthed of like, okay, you now have to bring other people to experience what you're experiencing. So from there, my wheels started turning of like, how can I do this? I was working through the years, but to be transparent, I mean, I've said this on other platforms, the catalyst was when we had an unfortunate situation where there's a young gentleman by the name of Mike Brown. He was killed by the police in Ferguson, Missouri. My wife and I went to Ferguson, Missouri to do a march with one of the civil rights organizations there. And during that march, I just had so many epiphanies based on, you know, what was happening. It wasn't a pleasant time. So imagine having this experience where you are literally being like, some people were being assaulted, verbally accosted, and just the craziest of human behavior. And then right after that, I was coming to Ghana. So I have this just harsh experience. And then like literally, I think it was like a few months later, I was coming to Ghana. And so on my way back from Ghana, that trip, I had to do a layover, I think in London. And I literally was at the airport and I started crying. I started crying because I was thinking about, like, I'm coming from a place where I don't have to think about these things. And it's not just thinking about these things on an individual level, but the implications of these ideas on a social, economic, educational level, right? And then London was the jolt back into reality because it was like all the billboards don't look like me. And it was not just the physicality of looks. It was right, the implications of what that means that hit me. And I remember it was almost like a movie. You know how you have somebody's like daydreaming and somebody slaps them, like, wake up? Because I was sleeping at somewhere at the London airport and somebody was like, hey, wake up, you can't sleep here. So it literally jolted me back into reality. I'm not lying. I think I went in the washroom and just cried because I was like, oh, I got to go back to America. And I got to experience this craziness. And from there, I told my wife, I said, I think the next step in our lives is Ghana. And from that moment, we started planning. And then in 2019, we had one-way tickets, the whole family. We arrived here in Ghana.
Yeah, there's a lot that I want to speak to you about after hearing that. And one part is the, I guess, resistance in a lot of people to come to Africa, to come to specifically West Africa, Ghana, because in their minds, they've been told for one reason or another that this place is dangerous, that this place is, you know, it's sad to say, but the reality is in the UK, and I'm sure in America, when you hear Africa, many people just refer to it as a country.
Yeah.
They feel like everyone is starving. It's dangerous. You're not going to be safe, especially if you're not black. You know, this is a dangerous place. And I mean, I'm reading Muhammad Ali's autobiography at the moment. And even he said he made some comments after he won his Olympic medal. He made some negative comments about Africa. Why would I want to live there? There's snakes and all of these things. And then he went back and reflected on that. And some Nigerians in America asked him, like, why did you say something so hurtful? So even people with African blood inside them in the West have got this kind of things put into their brain from a young age. So was there any resistance at that time from friends or family saying, are you sure? Like, is it?
Not a lot, because I kind of always been the child in the family that's like, Tim is going to do what Tim is doing. So it was, if Tim is going to Africa, it's like, well, that's Tim. That's what Tim is going to do. But there definitely was, and still is, like these salient kind of stereotypes that exist. And I'm empathetic, for people who feel that way, because I can understand, if you look at the history of a lot of our countries here on the continent, a lot of countries recently gained independence. You look at Ghana here, we talk about March 6, 1957. It's not a long time ago. And you think about what kind of tourism campaigns was happening during those times to promote Africa or Ghana or Nigeria or whatever, to the world. And even today, we don't see, we see more with the prevalence of social media. But I'll tell you what I did have. I did not know that I had this unconscious superiority complex. And I didn't recognize it until I had to share power and I had to share resources. So I have an NGO here. The name is Anidaso. Anidaso means hope. And one situation stands out in particular where, the currency, sometimes can be a little bit volatile depending on the year, depending on who's in administration in the West, right? So in Ghana, I remember we were doing this community project where we had to purchase a corn mill. And the guy that we were partnering with, he says, no, we have to buy this like now because the rates and this. I was like, we don't want to listen to you, right? We didn't say that, but that's what the idea was. And I forget what happened specifically, but I remember like it proved to be, he was right. And I remember him sitting us down and having a conversation. There's a guy we've known for like, at this time, maybe like 15 years. And he said, listen, you guys are coming here to visit. He said, Charlie, we live here, so we know. And it was those moments that I realized, okay, I still really don't trust you because I feel like I know better than you. And, you don't have as much exposure to the world as I do. And so I didn't realize that subconscious kind of superiority existed until I had to share resources and we had to share power. And it really had me reflect on some things about my own formation about the continent. And so I think even though it wasn't like an explicit, I'm better than you, it showed up when you have to, again, have those, those partnerships that require a deeper level of trust.
Yeah, I mean, that's the roots from, as you said, like from the UK's perspective is colonialism. So there's a complex built into you from when you're born that there's this hierarchy.
Yeah.
And even for black and brown people born in the UK or America, even though they know that, okay, we're not as high up on the ladder as the whites, when we go abroad, we've got the passport.
Yes.
We've got that. It's very hard to deprogram yourself from that. And I mean, we had a nice, taste of our own medicine when we applied for the visas here. And as a UK citizen, you normally, for a lot of tourist destinations, you get the stamp visa on arrival. We had to get a lot of documents, family stuff, organizations for us to be here. And when I asked my family about that, they said, well, how do you think it is for Ghanaians when they travel? And I thought, wow, I've been taking everything for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, so the journey of you coming back and forth over time then, how have your experiences been in terms of really wanting to stay here? Okay, you got that first taste. We've spoken about the spiritual and deep reasons, but how's actually life here and what made you really want to not just come back and forth, but say, okay, I'm going to live here now?
Yeah, I think it was dealing with the reality of I had accomplished what I was supposed to accomplish in the States, right? This whole pursuing of the American dream. By this time, I had a master's degree. We had, a nice house and, a middle-class neighborhood. But I really started looking at my son. And I started asking myself, what kind of life do I want for him? The fact that, where I lived, depending on what part of town you're in, you gotta have a gun, right? To protect yourself. And I'm not a person that's pro this or anti this when it comes to, carrying a weapon, because sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But I had to reflect on, but do I really want to live in a society where it is necessary, if I'm going to buy grapes, I need to have a gun on me? You understand? And so when I started looking at the life that I wanted for my son, I didn't know a lot. I just knew a few things. The first thing I knew was, as a responsible parent, I have to provide my child the most access to the most resources to be set up to be whoever God wants him to be. And I know that the most valuable resource that I can give him is a sense of identity. And because I've been exposed to the continent, I have to put him in an environment to where he grows up not feeling the same psychological and emotional pressures of being first a Black and then filling the gap. So it was really some of those experiences as a culmination, like my experiential knowledge in Ghana. It was looking at the family, and then I said, okay, the next step in our lives, like I've accomplished what this whole middle class dream is, right? In America, I've accomplished that. What's next? And when I started thinking about legacy, I said, no, I have to be able to create a legacy where my son lives in a different world.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about kids and families and all of those things as well, it's the real irony for me is that I always think about security as well. And from young being told that Africa's dangerous, and then actually coming here and realize I feel way safer and more comfortable here than in many parts of the UK and the US. Did you ever think about those sorts of things as well in terms of...
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, there's a different mentality that I have when I go back to the States. And it comes like the level of hypervigilance that I have to have with all colors. With all colors. I go back to certain places and I'm looking around. I make sure my doors are locked and all of that. I'm a spiritual person, so I take God with me where I go. But we still have to be wise, right, about what the reality is. But I think that was a factor. I think, for example, just thinking about like, I'm from Houston, Texas. Houston, for folks who may not know, Houston is in the southern part of Texas is in the southern part of the United States, and Houston is the fourth largest city in the United States of America. I think fourth or fifth. So that gives you perspective of how I grew up. And I grew up I didn't grow up in gangs and drugs and all that, but that was very close in proximity. So I saw enough of that to realize that like this is really stupid. And for my child, when you're a parent, you don't want your children to have, you try to reduce as much negative experiences that your children have, so they don't carry the same issues that you have. So I think in answer to your question, safety was a huge part of it. But it was really just about like mostly psychological safety. Putting myself and my family in an environment to where, again, when you walk outside, you don't have to worry about somebody coming in a drive-by or somebody coming into my son's school because they're having a bad day and they decide to, or I think the word now is unalive, or had to unalive, a bunch of people in the school. So all those things came into play with making this decision.
And I think to link that to your previous point about identity, this is probably one of the saddest things for me is that growing up in the West, this whole idea, you mentioned like Black identity from a young age. This was also in Malcolm X's autobiography, which I've read recently, that just the word Black is loaded with so many negative connotations. But then, unfortunately, instead of identity being seen as, okay, I have roots from this place, like an identity can be an extremely positive thing.
Yes.
When I grew up with family from Ghana, the identity was a positive cultural identity that had nothing to do with crime, drugs, violence, all of these things that in the West are often presented as synonymous with Blackness. So I feel like that's such a strong, it's so deep in the culture of now also infiltrated the British culture as well, that for you to speak about like identity, since you've moved to Ghana, do you still feel like this is an identity of Blackness, or has it been I'm African, or I'm being accepted into Ghanaian? Because for me, even as a brown man, seeing on the TV how they present people who look like me, I now can't watch a lot of Western media because I don't trust their representations of people who look like me, people who look like you, even white people, because it's just not accurate. It doesn't accurately portray the people in my life of all races. So how about in your situation?
Yeah, I mean, my story is very similar to a lot of Black Americans, to where, if you think about it, unfortunately, and even so, more so now, where there is an intentional and explicit erasure of history that's happening in the U.S., and that's not an opinion, that is a fact. Growing up, your story began as an African American, born and raised in America. Your story began with slavery, and it ends with current day oppression. Like literally, that's the big narrative. And I had one of my friends who who's an older guy, and he said something that really perfectly summarized in terms of media representation. There's a guy, I think now he's like in his 60s. So we have a show called, cartoon called The Flintstones.
Yes.
Which is set like prehistoric times.
Yeah.
And then there's a show called The Jetsons, which is set in a future times. And this is what he said that was really important. He says, when I watched The Flintstones, I didn't see me. So when they thought about us, they didn't even think about us in terms of being significant in the past. When I saw the Jetsons that represented the future, I didn't see me. So that means that they don't even think about who I am and my contributions to the future. And so I think that really summarizes like how media portrays us. And the truth is, until I came to Ghana and until I went to college and I started reading books like the autobiography of Malcolm X that I read at the age of 13, that was transformative in my life. And I read a bunch of other books, you know, even like books around theology, like, you know, Black Power, Black Theology, by Dr. James Cone, that talks about how as a Black person, you don't go into the world with this idea that I'm Black. It's more so set as a resistance. Like you get told you're Black. You don't know what you are until somebody tells you, right? And oftentimes, even in developing our children's identity, is often developed in a responsive way. So, for example, imagine having a child that the only time they're told that they're smart is when somebody says they're dumb. So somebody says they're dumb, you say, no, you're not dumb, you're smart. But that's the only time the child hears it. Versus the child knowing who he is and how smart he is, that when somebody comes along and tells him that, he's like, no, that's not me because I know who I am. So that's kind of how race, you know, and identity is formed. It's more of in a responsive way. And I think that because there was not a lot of stories and representation about Africa, I'll give you one story and I'll let you transition. But I think about even language, for example. Right now, I think it's called the African American Vernacular, AAVE. Used to be called Ebonics.
Yes.
Used to be called Black English or whatever. But even if you look at the phonetics of it, you know, a lot of times the phrases and the words end with vowel sounds. You know, what they do that for? You know, and you think about the transatlantic and how when you look at even you go down to South Carolina, you look at the Gullah Geechee people and how they speak a variation of pidgin.
Okay.
And you think about those individuals came from West Africa, right, who were coming from these different mother tongues. And even today, right, where the sounds, the language, the phonetics oftentimes end in vowel sounds. So those individuals were coming through that transatlantic when they came to the States, and then they were learning, even when you read some of those earlier kind of transcripts from some of the enslaved Africans, it's massa, aza, ainta, filina, right? Because there's vestiges of that West African mother tongue trying to be marred with this English that is different phonetically. And you see you see the legacy of that represented. So for example, for me, if I know this about how I speak, then you can't tell me that it's wrong to speak this way, especially if I know how to communicate to you in your language. And then I could go to somebody else and say, yo, see, they out there on that, what it do. They on that, you know, they on that. And right. And somebody may know what that means, but you can't tell me that it's wrong or improper because I know where it comes from. That means a lot to me now versus when a kid, you say, no, that's wrong. Don't speak that way. So it's about perspective, and it's about, as you mentioned in the beginning, right, the lens through which we're viewing ourselves.
I mean, it's so powerful because even in the UK, we grew up, like across the whole world, we consume so much media created by African Americans. Music has dominated the entire world, but unfortunately, there is a lens of that cultural superiority with, oh, look how they speak. That slang. It's a double-edged sword because one of it just shows how influential that community is. But at the same time, what bugged me is that, okay, I know this culture exists, but then it's the way it's portrayed is that something you consume and enjoy, but then you kind of put it to the side and, look, as you said, that's wrong. Look how they're speaking. This is entertainment. Whereas 99% of people across the world who are listening to that and enjoying it, they have no idea about the historical context that you just explained. And I feel like you can't rely on other people to teach you about yourself. That's the number one way to have that identity crisis and that complex you've been speaking about. So I think conversations like this, going and doing your own research wherever you're from, you don't have to be Black or African to study all different types of history, because no matter who you listen to, I feel like they're going to give you part of the truth. You need to go off and do your own research. But that's fascinating to hear about the linguistic connections and ties. So your specific work at the moment involves helping people from outside of Ghana settle to Ghana. Is that one of your...
Yeah, so I have a nonprofit organization or NGO. It's called Anidaso. Anidaso, our vision really is to educate and empower and equip folks in disenfranchised communities. So what that means specifically is there's two main things that we do. Number one, we do immersion programs where we bring people to Ghana for either a 5-week or a 2-week immersion experience.
Okay.
We're focused on spiritual, culture, professional development. The other side of it is like community, kind of like leadership, where we focus specifically with youth, doing programs around leadership and entrepreneurship and like really like how to develop income generating activities. So those are two main things that we do with the side of bringing people here to Ghana for immersion trips. Our whole focus is on, I would say it's more like cultural tourism. Mm-hmm. So it's not just going to the spaces. I mean, as an organization, we're a Christian organization. So we take a look at like non-Western expressions of kind of the Christian faith and theology. For example, like I mentioned, Dr. James Cone, who really talks about wrestling with ideas of like, Black violence and resistance, right? Mm-hmm. Where does this fit, right? In a religious kind of spectrum? Is there any room for, violence and resistance, right? These questions are oftentimes most contemporary, Christian leaders will never talk about that, right? Mm-hmm. And that fits into when people are protesting and fighting back, right? So we have a curriculum that looks at those things. And then we also have a lot of conversation with Ghanaians on all levels. So research shows that most people, when they come to the continent of Africa, they come for two reasons. It's either philanthropy mm-hmm. or missions. Mm-hmm. Coming to help somebody, or, you hear the same story all the time. I was going there to help them, but they end up helping me, right? They have so little, but so many smiles, So what we try to do is really introduce people to not just the side of Ghana that is poverty, but introduce them to entrepreneurs, leaders, mm-hmm. people in real estate, people doing agriculture. So if they want to see themselves as entrepreneurs here in Ghana, they meet people who are doing it. So we start to normalize these trans kind of continental relationships and business transactions. That's really one of our main goals. So we've been doing it now. Actually, this is our 10th year.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So this is our 10th year doing it. And again, like our focus really is to build bridges between the African diaspora.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we've spoken a lot so far about how from the African American perspective, what it's like to come here. But the other side of that is, how do Ghanaians receive African Americans when they come to Ghana for the first time? What's it like from their perspective to meet? Because physically there might be some resemblance, of course. But I know even as a Brit, we speak the same language as Americans. Yeah. But culturally, we're also very different.
Very different.
So how is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that sometimes, like...
no, there's definitely a cultural gap.
How is that gap bridged?
Yeah, so what we do is, again, I think we try to normalize. So one of the things we do is we have real conversations. Conversations like we're having right now. So we talk about the Western ego, the superiority complex. And we do it in a way to where, in my experience, I've seen that if you put Nigerians, Ghanaians, and Americans in a room, the Nigerians will be the loudest. we all know this. This is not a lie. But if you remove the Nigerians from the room and it's just Ghanaians and Americans, the Americans will be the loudest.
Of course.
The Americans will be taking up more space, talking the most. So what we try to do is create spaces where people can hear from everybody. Mm. And I remember having one of these conversations. So we do something called the Unite Conference. And we bring together these speakers, again, entrepreneurship and all those things. But we have real continental conversations about sexuality, marriage. We hit on that cultural iceberg. Yeah, we like to eat jollof and this. But how would you really feel if you married somebody from this? How would you really feel if this person, right? Those real questions. And I remember during the conversation, right, the Black Americans in a room complaining, you don't understand, America is so bad, it's so this, it's so that. And one of the Ghanaians says, then if it's that bad, why don't you come back home? And then most of the folks in the room were silent because it makes you wrestle with even this notion of privilege.
For sure.
Of like, when you come to Ghana, it doesn't mean you're coming to some bush, but infrastructurally speaking, hey, Ghana and the U.S. is not the same old. It's very different. So we have these real conversations so that people can get introduced to the diversity of culture that exists within the African diaspora. And again, like, let's start normalizing cross-continental conversations, connections, business. And that's really the primary goal, right? That's what we try to do.
Yeah, I think it's from the perspective of, I'm linking this to the Asians and Africans. When we in the West, I guess it's a British tendency, maybe an American tendency, but we love to complain. That's universal, part of our culture.
Complain.
And when, you've grown up complaining about, from my perspective, racism. I had a lot of racism as a kid because I had Asian and Black family in a very white area. So people were confused which word did they use for me, But, until I went back to Pakistan for the first time, and then I saw, okay, real poverty. It hit me hard, and it humbled me greatly to know that my family had sacrificed a lot and did everything they could to come to the UK and work hard and build a better life for me. Of course, Pakistan's a beautiful country with so much to see and so much warm hospitality to receive, but then it made me really be grateful for everything that the UK gave me, despite those problems that I was complaining about before. And I felt like in Ghana and in Pakistan, no matter what challenges people have, there's still a spirit that, despite the negativity, they'll still smile at you. They'll still make that effort to walk past you. And I don't know what that person's gone through, but there's still good morning, sir.
Yeah.
That's a level of humility that I think a lot of Westerners can really learn from.
Yeah.
And that took me a while to grapple within myself that I've been complaining my whole life. There are people with nothing who would do anything to be in my position as well, to have that passport and have those opportunities as well. So there is that plays on my mind sometimes when I'm talking negatively about my experiences. It's not that I'm complaining to that level and being ungrateful. It's a tough reality that you got to grapple with.
Yeah, and I think it's that's why it's so important to understand like our own formation and our own story, because there is a balance, right? When I came to Ghana, as you mentioned, I became more appreciative of the opportunities that existed in the place that I'm from, and I also recognized that with a level of privilege comes responsibility. So I can't just come to Ghana and enjoy coconut water and go to Labadi Beach and then do nothing, right? I can't do nothing about what I see. I'm not responsible for transforming the whole country, but I can take the little bit that I have with the time that I've been given to try to make an impact where I am right now. And I think that's the real space, and those are the real conversations that I like to have. And even even challenging my brothers and sisters from the US of like understanding, like, it's a privilege to be able to say, I have a blue passport. And if I really feel like I'm getting sick, even if I don't have the money, I probably can take out a credit card loan, get on a flight and head to the UK or the US. It's a level of privilege. So let's have that real conversation. It doesn't mean I'm saying that you should be ashamed. Privilege doesn't mean that you haven't worked for anything. But it does mean that there's a difference between those who are privileged to do certain things and those who are not. And learning to live, I think, living in the duality, right, of these cultural experiences is important, and accepting responsibility that comes with it.
But I think that's made me reflect a lot, because it is always in the back of my mind when I sit down with someone, whether it's in Pakistan, who looks exactly the same as me. And I can try and, I can give him a hug, I can call him my brother. But at the end of the day, knowing that in the back of my mind, I can go back, it's real. Whether we like it or not, we can say we're one people, whatever. You might look the same as someone else, but there is a big divide that it's uncomfortable, but it's there. But it doesn't mean that it has to, we need to be patronizing or condescending. But I think it takes a while for people to get to grips with that and understand that it is there. So, of course, those are the challenges, but maybe what are some of the most fondest memories that you've had since you've been in Ghana?
Fondest memories of Ghana?
Yeah,
the US?
Let's start with the US actually, and then we can move on to Ghana.
I mean, culturally speaking, I am a Black American. And even specifically, I am a Black American from Texas. And more specifically speaking, I'm a Black American from Texas who grew up in the church. So like that is the most salient parts of my identity. And so I was talking with someone yesterday, there's just like, that's who I am culturally. So that's what I connect with. That's how I relate. That's where I sit in spaces where I don't have to explain the joke. But then that doesn't mean that as my cultural kind of parameters are expanding, that doesn't mean that I think one of the challenges that we have is we think that embracing newness and differences means that you have to like throw away this over there. I mean, I talk to a lot of folks who are coming from the US, particularly Black Americans, where there's a lot of dualistic thinking, right? To love Ghana means I have to hate the US, right? Or people are moving here because they hate it so much there that they're in pursuit of something better here, which is the flipped opposite, right, of the average Ghanaian. It's like, Charlie, this place all. And they would do anything, some to go there. But I think culturally speaking, like, that's who I am. And even when I travel back and I connect with good friends and stuff, like it enriches my soul to have those deep connections with brothers and sisters that I love dearly. You know, here in Ghana, you know, it's, hey, Charlie, there's never a door, as they say, you can never be sad in Ghana because of the things that happen, even some of the things that are just ridiculousness. Like, I remember, it's just so many crazy stories. Well, so many stories I won't tell, but I'll just say this. Like, in Ghana, you see some of the craziest things that you're like, is this real life? Is Ghana a real place?
You gotta give us some examples.
Okay, I'm trying to think of things, but okay, I don't even know, like, right off the top of my head. But I mean, I'll tell you a story that, looking back on it, it's funny now, but it wasn't funny at the time. So I remember, like, the first house I lived in, and where we used to live, where my son used to go to school. We used to walk him to school, so we didn't have a car. And in my mind all the time was like, you know how like they have like those African like stories of like, my name is Timbo and I used to cross the river. So like I used to like, we had to step over like these creeks and stuff. So like every time I walked my son to school, like literally it was like cows and like just cow defecation, and we had to walk over a creek. So every time in my mind, I was just thinking like, man, this is literally, like, I could make one of those like very stereotypical like documentaries that they make. But there's just so many crazy stories, and I'm just like, hey, Charlie, Ghana, it is not a real place. So, but the biggest thing in terms of fun memories, I think really is oftentimes where I'll sit in spaces, and maybe sometimes it's especially in the cool season in Ghana, where I'll go somewhere, the weather's very nice, and I'll see my child playing with his friends. I'm not worried about anything at all. Like sitting in those moments, it's such, like, those are the moments that truly arrest my heart. When I see him being free to be a child, not a black child, not a whatever child, but just a child, and making meaningful friendships. And he's making really priceless memories that he's going to take with him for the rest of his life. When I have those experiences, those are the things that literally just make me tear up.
That's beautiful, because back to your point about picking your identity, I think anyone, like, I'm mixed, so you would often have people telling you which one pick.
Yeah.
The real beauty of this has come from you in that moment, letting go of everything and just embracing what's there in the moment, and realizing that, I feel, you know, forcing yourself into one box or another. I understand why people do it, but the moment you can let go, I feel like embracing that what's in front of you there, it enriches your life in such a way. I can feel it. I can see how you're that energy in that moment, which is definitely special. I guess the message is to anyone, firstly to, I guess, people, African Americans, but then we'll open it up to anyone who has never been to Ghana before, to West Africa.
Yeah.
What do they need to know? What is your message to those people who are on the fence? I'm not sure. I've seen a couple of Tim's videos. They're interesting, but they're on the fence. What's your message to them?
Charlie, you're not getting any younger. It's the truth.
It's true. It's true.
I've had people literally for like 15 years, one day. Yep. Say, there's no one. 15 years, one day. So, you know, let me say this to somebody watching this right now, especially for my folks in the States. 2025. You don't have any more excuses. Come to Ghana. You have all the YouTube content out there that shows you almost every nook and cranny of the country, from the north to the south, that shows you all the nightlife, everything. You don't have any excuse now. There's so many travel agencies. 2025, make Ghana on your, listen, I think people get their tax returns around this time. Take that tax refund. Forget your rent. Don't worry about your mortgage. Okay? First time I came to Ghana, when I went back, I couldn't pay my rent. But guess what? The memories were worth it. Actually, no, don't do that. Okay? Don't be don't be irresponsible. I'm not responsible if you came to Ghana and you go back homeless. Okay? I'm just saying, when I did it with no responsibilities, hey, the memories were invaluable. But seriously, I would say you're not getting any younger. Ghana, so many people have done it before you. This is not like climbing Mount Everest, okay? This is going to Ghana. Just come. It's not that serious.
And the thing is, that personally got to me because growing up with family from Ghana, and only at 31 years old have I finally made it. And the amount of times in our family we spoke about it. Oh, we're going to go. I can't wait to taste the food. I can't wait to see this, the weather, the fruit. There is a mental block that's still so, like, it's so simple. Book the ticket, do the visa application. It's so simple. But in the mind, it's so easy to keep putting it off for the reasons we've spoken about today. But once you get here, instantly I got off the plane and I just felt at home.
I'll share this briefly as a brief plug also to the book, right? So I wrote a book called Aquaba. This is your guide to Ghana. I wrote this book seriously because I get that question so much and people literally don't know where to start. So I literally outline, if you're visiting Ghana or you're moving to Ghana, I literally take you step by step, like what you need to do to come. And like, I really made it really easy for you. The book is digital, so you can get it anywhere and just read through it. It takes you step by step. If you literally like, I don't know where to begin, and I have, insights in the book in terms of like foods to try, spots that you should go to in terms of cultural spots, even everything from like, do I need a visa or do I need these particular vaccinations or any of those things? I outline everything for you because the most thing is, especially for my folks who are African American and even my Africans who are American, who haven't been to Nigeria, South Africa, wherever you're from in a while, Charlie, you're not getting any younger. 2025, literally we're turning to 2035. So why not come today? You don't have any reason. Oh, my children, bring them.
I think, the mind will make a million reasons. I need to get the vaccination. It takes 5 minutes. You book it, boom, yellow fever vaccination, you're done, easy. And I'm telling you, the level of friendliness of the people, they tell us in the UK we're polite. I've met another level of politeness since I've been here. It makes me shy as a Brit to know that everyone's greeting me, everyone's smiling at me in a way that you can watch the videos and hear people talking about it, but I can't explain that in words. It's a feeling of people when you interact that just hits you in the soul, that I know when you're having a bad day and someone pulls a bad face at you, it can make a day worse. But here's kind of the opposite where, you get humbled multiple times a day by that humility and spirit of people here. So, But Tim, thank you so much for outlining, your experiences today. Before we wrap up this conversation, do you have any other things that we've missed or you'd like to mention?
I just want to thank you guys for continually creating conversations that help, expand our perimeters of culture and identity. And it's really good to see so many different stories from so many different people. And I'm grateful to be here. So thanks for having me.
No, really appreciate it. And of course, to anyone who is interested in what we've been talking about today, all of Tim's details will be in the link below. So too many things to mention, but we've got the book. We'll have all the links to Tim's website as well. Thank you very much for watching. Please let us know in the comments what you think, where you're viewing from, any questions you have for Tim. Maybe you disagree with anything we've said as well. We want to hear all of it. And if you have benefited from this, we'd really appreciate if you could subscribe and share it with other people who you think would enjoy it. So with that, Anidaso, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.